Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jason DeFalco, Superintendent of Schools in Blackstone Millville Regional, and we are very pleased to be here this evening with all of you watching from home for a special edition, a reopening edition, if you will, of our schools, Facebook Live. And so I'm going to just, in a quick minute, I'm going to kick it over to my colleagues to introduce themselves. But just want to share with everyone tuning in a little bit about the structure for tonight to give everybody a sense of how we're going to engage and kind of frame out the time that we have together. Because we do have a hard stop at 6 o'clock because we have a couple of other meetings that we need to attend from 6 to 8. So with that, as everyone's aware, we are going to spend a good chunk of our time together this evening speaking a bit about our programming and reopening plans, specifically for our special populations. And what I mean by that is our students with special needs, our English language learners, pre-K, and answer whatever questions that our friends tuning in may have regarding our reopening plans for some of our learners who need the most support. And then we're going to actually transition, assuming we have time, into some of the questions and topics that were sent into us from our school community. And just a real big thank you to our parents. Many of you took quite a bit of time and collected some questions and fielded some questions from friends or neighbors, and crafted them into some emails for me and for our team to really help us address the issues and the concerns that are important to you. And so that's what the whole premise of tonight is about. We want to make sure that we do just that. And please note that what we don't get to this evening, we do have another Facebook Live next Thursday, September, I think it's the 3rd, which is hard to believe. Same time, 5 to 6 o'clock. So if we don't get to all your questions tonight, we will definitely get to them next Thursday for our next Facebook Live session. We are trying diligently to make sure that we are working as closely as we can with all of our families and getting to you the information, not only that we need you to have, but the information that's really important to you, because we recognize that those two things may not be the same. So with that, let me turn it over to my colleagues to introduce themselves to you.
Hi, I'm Matt Aaronworth, the Assistant Superintendent.
I'm Jill Piligallerani, the Director of Learner Support Services.
Hi, I'm Karen Young, the School Nurse Leader.
Excellent. So thanks all for being here this evening. And Jill, we're going to turn it over to you first so that we can speak a little bit about our special populations and answer any of those specific questions that we may have. And just so folks watching at home know how this is going to work, we do have our media and tech lead watching the Facebook posts. So he will be sending me your questions through like an instant messenger kind of technology. All right.
So I know I've had the opportunity to speak at, we've had I think a previous Zoom session and also with school committee. So what I thought I would do is kind of, sum up some of the information that was shared and, be here to answer some questions tonight. So the first thing I just want to stress to everyone in the community that our special education department here is committed to providing specialized services and programming to support all models of teaching and learning. So it doesn't matter if your child is in person, if they're doing the hybrid or they're fully remote once the fall opens, we are definitely committed to making sure our students are getting all the services and supports they need and ensuring that FAPE is being delivered. And of course, we also want to make sure that when we're educating our students that we're definitely consistent with the need to protect health and safety of all our students with disabilities, as well as all those individuals who are working with them. One of the things that the Department of Ed had in their guidance was that as districts, they wanted us to prioritize to the maximum extent possible special education services to students. And the two categories that they really wanted us to look at initially are our youngest learners, so our preschool population, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And also they wanted us to look at our students with more significant and complex needs. So our goal as a district was to take a look at those two populations first and come up with models that we can definitely increase the in-school, the in-person learning for these students. And that has been our goal. And actually, we've already reached out to a lot of those families to be able to offer some additional, in-person for them. Our preschool that I had the chance to talk about last school committee meeting is we actually have an integrated preschool program. So what that means is we have students who have disabilities and students without disabilities who are our role models who participate. And I know there are some districts who had made a decision because of some of the social distancing to only include students with disabilities. However, we felt very strongly as a district the importance of having an integrated preschool. So we did move forward with contacting all of our preschool families via email or phone to be able to set up a model to, again, ensure all the health and safety protocols are in place, but to develop a model where we can have class sizes that continue to allow us to social distance and as well as to limit the cohorts of students. So right now, in our preschool program, we're going to have 37 students total who are going to be participating in person. And some of our students participate 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, or 5 days. And we have 13 students who are participating remotely. And in all of our models, whether it's in person or remote, we do have a combination of students who are our role models, so those without disabilities, as well as students with disabilities. Our class sizes right now in the preschool range from 4 to 10, and our largest cohort at this time is 12. And the reason it could be a little different than the class is we may have students who are in a cohort who come 3 days a week, some will come 2 days a week, and within that same cohort, 5 days a week. But what we did within that is to make sure that we're limiting the contact and not exceeding large numbers for students to have contact. We actually were also, which was wonderful, I did say remote, we wanted to be able to provide those students because we do have some special education students as well as some from our role models who either didn't feel comfortable coming in right now in person or they had some health concerns that wouldn't allow them to come safely into the building. So even though we're a small little preschool, we were able to actually offer that every day opportunity for some of our kids for remote learning. So it was wonderful to have that. Our preschool team was actually involved in this process along with our Millville Elementary principal, Ms. Schaefer. And, we were able to put this together and be able to reach out to families to be able to provide them this opportunity. So we're very happy to have all our little ones back in school. We've also started to look at, again, when we talk about our students with more complex needs, we also have some very specialized programs here in the district. And our goal was, as was recommended by the department, to take a look at those students to say, those are students who significantly struggle with remote learning, who are in a small classroom, most of their day. So we've reached out to those families and we've also been able to provide that opportunity. What we've also done is we have some additional students who are considered at high needs that may not be in a classroom all day long with specialized instruction, but they are in the small classroom more than 75% of their day. So we've also been trying to look at opportunity to provide for those families, for our students to have a little bit more of in-person learning. And again, no matter what we're doing for our kids, whether it's in-person, hybrid, or remote, we are very committed to make sure our kids get exactly what they need and what their IEPs are saying for them. The other thing I wanted to bring up is in our district right now, we have approximately, and I will tell you this number changes on a daily basis, probably hourly basis, we have approximately 310 students in our district who are on IEPs and are getting some services. And that's from preschool all the way up to our Community Connections program for our students who remain with us until we're 22. Currently, and again, these numbers were taken a few days ago, I'm hoping they're similar. Out of those 310, 19% of our students are participating in full remote, which is approximately 59 of those students. And 81% of our students are participating, whether it's full in-person, K through 3, or through our hybrid model. So approximately 251 of our students will actually be coming in, and working with our teachers. The one thing I know I've said several times, again, it doesn't matter what type of program or what type of model your child's working in, services will continue to be provided. What I will say is we all have to remember that remote learning or even hybrid learning in relation to in-person learning could look a little bit different. And because of that, as part of the Department of Ed's guidance, our special education team, including our teacher liaisons, as well as our team chairs, are going to be reaching out to every family for a student on an IEP. And our goal is to be able to connect with them prior to that first day of school, to be able to review with them some information of, how did it go with your child with remote learning in the spring? What worked, what didn't? What did you see as their progress? And also to talk about how the services are going to look moving forward. Again, we have some students who are fully remote. We have some who are hybrid and in person. But again, with social distancing, with our health and safety procedures, things could be a little bit different. So because of that, what we'll be sending out after we have conversations with families, if families remember last spring, they received a remote learning plan. At that time, the Department of Ed had asked us to kind of condense our day down for all students. So you would get a schedule that would show when staff is available, what activities, services, supports would be going on. This is going to look a little different. Even when we have students who are hybrid and remote, the expectation is it isn't just a quick drop in with your teacher. It's instruction, it's services, it's support. It could be live learning of a combination of independent work as well as some videos or taped lessons. And with all of that being said, what we're going to be doing is there will be new plans coming home. They're called, the Department of Ed has named them, the COVID Special Education Learning Plans. And every family of a special ed student, after our staff reach out to you, will be getting one of those plans. And in there, it's going to have documentation of the conversations that we've had with you, being able to express, any concerns you may have. And it's also going to have a schedule there that's going to show what special ed services, as well as some of the inclusion services that your child will be getting, no matter if they're in-person, hybrid, or remote. I do want to stress that these plans do not replace the IEP. The IEPs are still going to be written based on what we feel the students need as a result, what is necessary as a result of their disability when they're in school. But as I said before, in this time, services may look a little different. So that's what this plan is going to be sent out to you, so you know exactly what those differences will look like. So we'll be working on those. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jill, can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
I think they are relating specifically to some of this.
Sure.
We have a few questions regarding, and so just so that folks that are listening, if you see kind of your stream of questions, we're going to just shuffle them around a little bit, and I'm going to ask specifically right now the ones related to special education, because there's quite a few that are coming through for special ed. So
Sure.
we're going to kind of group them, by topic, basically, and manage that the best way we can. So a couple quick things, Jill. What will happen with evaluations and the evaluation process? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Absolutely. That was on one of my list of things to discuss. So our IEP evaluations, when we returned to school, we had students who were not being able to be evaluated. We had IEP meetings that were not able to be held. Parents chose to postpone them. So once we get back to school, families should expect some communication with our team chairs and or school psychologists about moving forward with our evaluations. Even if we have students who are remote, if it is safe for students to come in, we will continue to move forward with the evaluation. So our goal is to, number one, make sure we kind of catch up with all the things that we weren't able to complete when we were remote learning, and also move forward with any new evaluations. So we are going to be moving forward with evaluations as soon as school starts. So families should anticipate a phone call. What I will say is, if in that first week of school, I know things are just getting settled, but if you don't hear from someone, please make sure you do reach out to special education. We want to make sure that if for any reason the phone number we're trying to reach is wrong, or we haven't been able to connect, we want to make sure that you definitely reach out and connect with us. But our goal is to get out to all of those families, because yes, we will be moving forward with not only the evaluations, but any of the meetings that were postponed as a result of our school closure.
Great. A couple other questions, and I'm just kind of scrolling through these to make sure we get these. I don't miss anything here. So we have one parent who's just asking, she has a unique situation. I would urge this parent to outreach to you directly. But a question, if there is a health and safety protocol, for instance, like keeping windows open, right, in the classroom, but there is a student who has a hearing loss and could be impacted negatively by having, the windows open and the outdoor noise kind of filtering in. What are some ways that we could work to make sure that that student's not being impacted by that accommodation?
So we do have students in our district right now with hearing losses that could be very mild or could be more moderate and severe. So there are specific accommodations in place. So what we would do is, like we always do when school starts, is we always try to take a look at the physical spaces of our buildings. And it could be where things are located, the noise from the chairs. It could be the noise from the halls, to make sure we kind of look at how can we best address those, issues. Our speech and language pathologist will also be part of those discussions because they work with those students directly and to be able to help assess that. I will tell you that we also have some students with hearing impairments in our school that are also followed by consultants that we have for the teachers of the deaf and some schools that we have. So they're there to help support us, whether it's from technology that students need, FM systems that they already need, do we need to move things around, and how do we make that classroom more accessible for students?
Jill, would you be the best person for this parent to reach out to?
Yep, I think I would be the first one to contact, and then we can have a discussion and we can go from there.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Some additional questions on special education. Will IEP services be provided to students only during in-school days if you're in a hybrid model, or will they have services provided both in school and during a remote portion of the hybrid model?
So our goal is to provide the services that are needed both in person and remote. And like I said before, when we write the learning plans, the COVID special education learning plans, they could look a little bit different. Some of them may be using some of our specialized programs, but we're actually working with our team chairs and our principals to say how best do we make sure that those services can be delivered, whether they're in school and hybrid, because we understand that those services do need to be consistent. Now, would it be speckled with some of those independent work, project work, and programs? Yes. But our goal is to be able to provide those services as well, whether it's speech and language, OT, PT. There might be some telehealth services going on as well. That could be live, that could be taped. So we don't want it to be the only time they get special ed instruction is when they're in school. We want to balance.
Excellent. Another follow-up question. Will services like OT happen in person for kindergartners that are attending in person? Because as you know, Kay, you're either full remote or full in person. Mm-hmm. So will those services be in both realms, I guess, both in person? And
OT and PT, or speech and language services for our kindergarten kids. If you are in school, of course, it would happen there. And if you're remotely, we will have teletherapy that will be happening for those students as well.
Excellent. Okay. Mm-hmm. Just screening through, make sure I don't miss any. There are other questions in here, but I'm just pulling out the ones that are unique to special education. So I'm just going back and scrolling through. If you want to continue, Jill, with any additional information as I'm looking here.
Yeah, and there could be families that have kind of more of a very personal question regarding their child or a service. So I would encourage them to definitely reach out. If you have those questions, by a phone or email, I'm definitely available to go over those with you. One thing I wanted to bring up too was about team meetings. We talked about that we would be moving forward with evaluations, any meetings that needed to take place or meetings that still need to take place moving forward. So we did have this in our, our opening documentation that, our goal is to definitely maintain the health and safety requirements, and we are trying to reduce visitors entering the building. So as much as possible, we are looking to hold our team meetings remotely, of course, via Zoom or via Google Meet. But of course, in extenuating circumstances, if those do exist, we would definitely allow the parent to come into the building, but we would definitely be continuing with kind of a hybrid model. It could be that if the parent does need to come in, again, if there's an extenuating circumstance, it could be that the parent and the team chair are in the room and other people would be, either through Google or Zooming into that meeting. We just want to make sure that we're maintaining all the procedures and protocols that we have in place. So we're going to continue to move forward with our team meetings. But again, those might look a little bit different, as we enter school, at this point.
And a few follow-up questions, Jill, just to go back to some of the services, that you were mentioning regarding specifically the delivery of those services. Will services like OT, speech, PT be offered in complete accordance with IEPs, both in person or remotely? I think you kind of addressed that, but.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so they will have some in person, they could be remote. You mentioned even some telehealth that could be included in that. Okay.
Right. And during those remote, it could be a video of something the kids are learning. It could be live. It's going to be a combination when they are home, but yes, we're going to continue to deliver those services.
Okay. Will someone be contacting us about the plan for each individual child's IEP? And I think you mentioned that too, that there's the Department of Education is requiring a new COVID.
So it's called the COVID Student Learning Plan. And what's going to be happening is our staff is coming back next week. So at some time in the next couple of weeks, every special education family, it will be contacted by either their teacher liaison or the team chair. So again, there's a couple of questions, feedback we want to get from families, but we'll also be talking about how services, supports, accommodations, and modifications will look. All of that would be written up in this plan. It will come out to you along with the letter, like it's called a proposal letter. That will be coming out saying this is what we discussed and this is how we'll be moving forward. Again, just to stress, this is not a new IEP. This is how the services will look during this time. So yes.
Is there an option for kids with an IEP to go five full days a week of in-person instruction? Can you talk a little bit, Jill, about the priority?
I will. So we were asked to look at our more significant students. And in that population of students, it was our youngest learners, our preschool, which I did talk about. And it's also our students with more complex, significant disabilities. So those are our students who are in more of our substantially separate and very specialized programs. For those students, there will be an opportunity. We're trying to say, we have to look at our students and say, who are our highest needs? And then we go from there. We're also looking at another population of students that would consider to be high needs, but may spend most of their time, say, in a classroom outside the regular education classroom, but not in a substantially separate program all day long. We're looking to provide an additional day for those students, but they will also still have some remote time, but we're trying to get some more in person for them. So the students that we're looking at right now, again, for all the health and safety reasons, are our students who are most complex, high-need students will have the opportunity for 5 days right now. And those families at this point have been contacted, but we're actually in the process of contacting kind of our next group of students that we find might need a little bit more than, the 2 or 3 days.
So, Jill, is it fair to say there's been a prioritization?
Absolutely, yep. And we were asked to do that by the Department of Ed to prioritize our learners.
And if any family wants to discuss that, we would encourage them to reach out. We're happy to speak to anybody about what they feel their child needs if it's something different than what they're currently getting. Yes, in
Absolutely.
terms of the number of in-person days. Another question, parent asks, I'm curious to know what the remote model looks like for PT, SLP, and OT, as the delivery method used in the spring was via Zoom or group sessions. The parent is sharing that it was disastrous and difficult to get the student engaged, their particular student engaged. It'd be helpful to have a detailed weekly plan to work on where we could submit a short video and send it, back to the OT or PT person, showing the student actually engaging in that particular piece of work.
So what would be helpful, I think, for families is when you are contacted by the liaison or the team chairperson, if you have these questions, we can definitely have a conversation directly with our OT, PT, and speech and language. We know every student's different. I will let you know, yes, we are going to still have groups for OT, speech and language, and PT. But if you're finding that your child's really having a hard time engaging, we can look at those alternative ways to kind of assess students, see what their progress is. But I agree. We want to make sure, and you'll see in the learning plan is, how are we best supporting parents and communicating with them so we know what's kind of coming up and moving ahead so they can kind of prepare for that remote as well. So you have any of those questions, you feel free to reach out to me personally, or when you get that phone call from the liaison or the team chairperson, express that as well, and we can have a follow-up call with our specialist with you as well.
Great. And it looks like maybe one of the last special ed questions, at least right now, is the district prepared to immediately shift to a full remote delivery model for students on individual education plans within 24 hours if we're shut down again with minimal notice? What does that communication plan look like? So can I just address the communication piece, Jill, quickly?
Absolutely.
I do think that as a school system, the communication portion of this work is a strength. And what I mean by that is we will continue to leverage every mode of communication through opportunities like this, through videos, through emails, text messages. So if there is any need to make a sudden shift in our plans, we will absolutely be prepared to do that, and we will be prepared to communicate that very thoroughly. But Jill, if you want to address specifically the special education portion of that.
So I think in special education, it's the same. I mean, remember, this isn't going to be like what happened in the springtime. In the springtime, we were all just kind of thrown into something that's brand new. So I'm sure you all know that we also have 10 days that we're going to be having with our staff before we start school. And that's not only to prepare our staff and our students for coming back in person, it's also to prepare everyone for if we have to make that shift. So I think special ed is no different than what we're going to be doing as the entire district. We're all preparing for if or when the time comes that we have to make that shift. I do not anticipate any significant delays. That's our goal.
Joe, I think I can tackle the next question. It isn't specifically related to special education per se, but it could be. One parent is asking, how are kiddos that are mostly in the general education setting, but require frequent attention, i.e. there was an aide in this particular classroom last year, it was a fourth grade classroom, in order to progress without someone directly with them. You know, for instance, if a child has ADHD or dyslexia or something, I think what the parent is asking is about that individualized attention. One of the things that I would actually pose for this year is that our students won't have ever received, I don't think, more attention, more direct attention. Specifically because our students in our hybrid model will have class sizes around 13. Mm-hmm. So those 13 students will still have opportunities for working with and getting support from our paraprofessionals, from our special educators. And so I think to this particular parent's question, and Jill, please weigh in if you think I'm off base with this, I think our students will get more attention now, specifically for the in-person instruction because the classes are so small. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have any particular sense of it.
No, I agree. And remember, when they're in school, it doesn't matter if it's a class of 13, 14, or 15, there would be an extra support person in there, you know, to help with that. I think if some families know that during last spring, we were able to address some of those, that we had some students who were fully inclusion. And what we did was we tried to add, because remember it was half day at that point, some additional support to make sure kids were on the right path, that they were keeping up, if they had any additional questions. But I think the model as a whole right now, because the amount of students that are going to be either in front of a teacher or online is going to be much smaller, there will be more focus and attention on that group of students.
Okay, that was my sense as well. In addition to that, remember families that for classes that are larger, we are separating them into two, and those teachers have a partner teacher. Mm-hmm. So again, even if you are, say, in a kindergarten class or a first grade classroom and there are 20 students who come every day, those 20 students are not in the same classroom. They're actually in separate classrooms so that we have the groupings around 10 with a partner teacher. So I actually feel that this model will be really helpful specifically to that. Mm-hmm. Jill, do you have any other pieces you want to mention quickly before we shift? Because those are all of the special education questions right now. There's a bunch of other questions, but.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to just stress is we have been in this district been looking very hard at making sure that our models across our grade levels are consistent when it comes to the programs that we're using. So please know that that's something that we're continuing to focus on. So we're not going to stray from that. We have specific programs that we're using both in regular ed and special ed, and we're going to continue to maintain that no matter what model that student's in for special ed. The only other area that I just wanted to touch upon briefly is our other special population, that is our English language learners. And again, the same with our English language learners, that when school reopens, our learners will engage in services to continue to develop their language skills in the areas of reading, writing, speaking, and listening, as well as helping them promote the acquisition and development of our academic language skills. There's always ongoing consultation between our ESL teachers as well as our teachers, and where thoughtful planning is going into finding time to make sure there's cohorts of students that are coming out for services, or if our teachers need to be pushing in. Just like in special ed, we are identifying some of our students who are considered high needs English language learners, and those students will be given opportunity for some additional time for in-person learning to make sure that their needs are being met. So it was just the ELs.
Perfect. Okay. So if folks tuning in at home, and if our team is ready, we can shift gears into some of the more general questions. But I would encourage families that are watching, if you sent a question in and it wasn't answered quite in the way you were looking for, meaning that maybe we didn't get the question right, by all means, outreach any one of us directly. If you have additional questions, you certainly can outreach myself or Jill at any time, the principal, the team chair for your child, any one of us. If you want to start with us, we can send you in the right direction. We're happy to make sure you get all the information you need. And so why don't we shift into some of the more general questions that are, or unrelated questions of special education or EL. Matt, this is a question for you, specifically around mask breaks and how lunches are going to work. This particular parent's sharing that there is a study showing that 6 feet may not necessarily be far enough apart indoors without masks. Can you talk a little bit about the mask breaks and the lunch setup and what that's going to look like?
Sure. So the hope is that the schools will be providing mask breaks outdoors. I know that with the elementary schools, I should say, each of the schools are going to have their own lunch schedules and protocols for during lunch, but the elementary schools will be incorporating recess into those lunch schedules. And while students are out at recess, that would be the opportune time to have mask breaks. Additionally, the middle and high school have been identifying different ways to incorporate mask breaks into their days. One of those includes the possibility of taking classrooms outside. We have been in the process of procuring a number of tents for the fields and a system of signing those tents out so that classes could rotate through them and make use of them during the day. And that would also provide an opportunity for mask breaks. The lunch plans did typically, at the beginning, include eating in the classrooms. But as referenced earlier, I believe principals are still exploring the options of having a different setup so that students may be coming to the cafeteria within a group of 50 that would be spaced out possibly more than 6 feet, which would again enable more mask break time. And for example, the high school is exploring the idea of using some outside spaces as well during the lunch. So we are of the mindset that the 6 feet is a safe distance based on the guidance that we've received, and students should be able to take their masks off. However, we are still exploring other options that will provide opportunities for extended distance between students and extra mask breaks.
Thanks, Matt. Karen, this question's for you. A parent's curious about what would the protocol be should a child become infected with COVID? So if we had a positive case in one of our classrooms, how would we actually navigate that?
They, as far as being symptomatic in the classroom or after they've been tested?
That's impossible.
So if someone presents with symptoms while at school, their teacher will call the school nurse and do a quick triage, finding out what the child's symptoms are, and then deciding whether that child needs to be seen in the regular health office, which is going to be for well children only, or our medical waiting room, which is where the nurses will be evaluating the sick children, and they'll wait for the parents to pick up. So if we have a child that, we evaluate in the medical waiting room, we feel the symptoms are consistent with COVID, we'll place a call to the parents. Parents are expected to pick their children up within 30 minutes or have friends or family members willing to do so, and, then be evaluated by their healthcare provider, get tested, and we'll go from there as far as what the tests say as to when they can come back to school. So we do have all those protocols.
And if a child, let's say we execute on that protocol and we hear back from the family and the child's positive for COVID.
So then they would need to be out for at least 10 days from the date that the symptoms started. And they would also need to be fever-free without the use of fever-reducing medications for 24 hours and have an overall improvement in symptoms. So all three of those things have to happen. If someone after 4 days doesn't have a fever and they feel great, they still can't come back before the 10 days.
Okay. And how about the classmates of that child or the teacher? How would we go about supporting and taking care of the classroom that child was participating in?
Until we get the positive test back, then we can't do anything. But once we have a positive test, then at the elementary level, the entire class would be considered the cohort. So those 12 kids or how many are in that specific section of the classroom. In the middle school and high school, it would be anyone who is within 6 feet of the infected individual. And so those people will be notified by the Board of Health, and I will also be in touch with families. And then those people should also be tested so that we know if they're also positive. Not everyone exhibits symptoms. In the last day or two, the CDC did say asymptomatic individuals do not necessarily need to be tested. We are still requiring it.
Yeah, agreed. I think we have taken the approach that better to be safe and better to err on the side of caution. And we've been looking at those guidelines, like the 3 feet and the 6 feet, and this last one that you mentioned about the asymptomatic piece, Karen, as more of a minimum, right? Like we actually want to be beyond that to support everybody's health. So that makes sense.
If you are a close contact, then you do need to quarantine for 14 days. If you end up testing positive, then it shifts to the positive protocol.
Okay, thank you. And there was a follow-up to that I can answer. One of the parents asked if a child is quarantining, can they shift to remote learning? The answer is yes. They can shift to remote learning. Okay, moving on. We had a question, I can answer this one about kindergarten. How many kids do we have right now for kindergarten? We have approximately 83 students that are looking to do in person. And to our kindergarten families, remember that those students are split up with partner teachers. So Ms. Schaefer, who is the elementary school principal at Millville, where our kindergartners will be attending this year, she has hired a couple of partner teachers to work with the classroom teachers where the numbers are a bit larger to actually get those numbers down. So the classroom sizes will be in that 15 range, as we've mentioned. So we got to that question. I'm scrolling through here. Matt, here's a question for you. What will drop off and pick up and drop off look like? One of the last meetings had raised the possibility of parents not even being able to get out of their cars. And there is some concern about having someone outside of, the family household coming to the car to take the child out and exit the child from the vehicle.
So again, the drop-off and pickup schedules and protocols are going to be determined at the building level. Given the nature of the layout of each of the buildings being different, there are different numbers of entry points and exit points. There are different roadways that are being able to be used at the buildings. The idea is that we will try to limit the number of students going through each entryway, and it will be in an organized system where not all cars are releasing their students at once. There will be faculty present at all of the entry and exit ways during drop-off and dismissal, so that it shouldn't be necessary to have an individual come and get the child and walk them specifically to the door, particularly at the upper levels. But if it is necessary with respect to any students with special needs or physical limitations, then that can be arranged directly on an as-needed basis. The other piece regarding the drop-off and pickup is, I believe Dr. DeFalco mentioned earlier at a school committee meeting, we will be engaging some additional school resource officers. The idea being that they will help to be able to control the flow of traffic, move people along, make sure that students are exiting and entering cars safely without any intrusion from people that may not be supposed to be interacting with those students, and also just to give an additional sense of confidence and safety, and in the event that anything does happen, to have that presence on campus.
Matt, I just want to speak to something on that, because I think that it's important for our community to think about this. I think when we think about procedural things like drop off and pick up, we go to what we know, right? We go to whatever systems and processes were in place, last year. I think we need to forget that. And I don't, that's kind of an odd thing to say, but I think we need to forget the things that we used to do in terms of these protocols and processes, because as you said, they're going to look really different. So for instance, we're not all going to use the main entrance of the building, right? So if you're at one of the elementary schools, your first graders may come in one door, your second graders may come in a separate door, your third graders may come in another door, right? So we're going to have a totally different layout, as you said, Matt, utilizing a variety of entry and exit points. I think the other thing for families to keep in mind is we are not dealing anywhere near with the numbers of students that we typically do. And let me give you a for instance. At the most, and this is if everybody is present, all 100% of the kids are present, the high school will have about 156 kids a day. They usually have about 430-ish. That's it. Middle school, the same. Middle school is getting about 440. They'll have about 150 kids. So, when and I'll share the elementary numbers in a minute, but so when we think about drop off and pickup, we have to remember that we are dealing with a far smaller population. Mm-hmm. The other thing that's important to note is that of that 150 students, about a third of those kids are taking the bus. So yes, there'll be a lot of cars, there'll be a lot of activity, but we're not talking about the arrival and or dismissal of 440 students. We're talking about the arrival and the dismissal in the middle school's case of about 150. So that's a significantly different number that I think is important to mention.
And to your point also, Jason, as I said, each of the building levels are going to be developing their own protocols. And it's very possible at the elementary school, I know that things are not finalized, but there were conversations about specifically calling small groups of students out so that they could exit the building almost to the degree that it was one at a time. So cars can be pulling up, students would be called from a safe space, and then the student would exit almost individually, followed shortly thereafter by another student. And we would be calling students so that they could get into the cars. So as Dr. DeFalco mentioned, there's not going to be a large stream of students pouring into or out of the building. And there will be faculty and staff members that are supervising all of this to make sure that everyone's safety is priority number one, and that is ensured.
I just think those are important pieces to mention. Then it'd be a parent asked a question, Jill, and I think you and I can probably tag team this one about RTI. Who will be instructing students during RTI? So if you're at the elementary level and you're full in person, you're K to 3, it's going to be your classroom teacher or the reading specialist, whoever the support people are in place for that block of time. If you're in a hybrid model at the elementary level, it will be your science and social studies teacher. Because remember, your science and social studies teacher is going to be doing that work with you or with the students remotely, but will include an RTI block. And that teacher is working in our building. So although that teacher is working with students in a hybrid model who are at home doing the remote portion, they're still right next door to their partner teachers. So they're going to be collaborating with their grade level team in order to best be able to support the students who are in that remote portion of the hybrid model. But Jill, there's a question about what about students who can't complete the independent work? How will that impact their grades? Will accommodations be made to help support that? So I don't know if you want to talk specifically about some of the students with special needs. I can talk a little about the general ed students.
So students with special needs, I mean, some of the activities I would think about as when they're in full person, students are given activities that they should be able to do independently. If there's any questions, any concerns, I would definitely recommend you immediately reach out to staff. Because just like when students are in school full time and they're given those activities, sometimes kids struggle with them at home. We need to know that. It would be the same thing during remote or hybrid. When we're giving activities for students to complete, the expectation is that they've received enough instruction to be able to do that independently. And if they can't, they need to let us know. In special ed, we do have some students too at the middle school and the high school that in addition to their classes, they're also participating in academic support to be able to support them through that as well. So that will definitely continue. The other thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned RTI. So we do have some students who are remote who may be students who have received some type of remedial instruction in reading with a remedial reading specialist. Those services are going to continue whether they're in school or they're remote as part of our RTI process as well.
Yeah, and I think, you answered the question, I think, really well, Jill, in terms of that, because, whether you're a student with special needs or you're a general education student, if you're stuck on your work, you're stuck. And so we need to make sure that the classroom teacher is aware of that, so he or she can work directly with that student, whether it's in person or whether it's remote, to help get the child unstuck and get the child moving. And to the second part of that question was about grades. So there was a question about how this will impact grades. So remember, at the elementary level, we use a standards-based report card that measures the progress towards each of the standards. At the secondary level, the middle and high school, we do use a more traditional grading system. And I do think it's important to remind folks that assignments count, where in the spring, there was this kind of loose, credit, no credit system that the commissioner had directed us to all move with. That is not the case. Students will be graded for their assignments. But that doesn't mean that if a child doesn't need additional time or additional support, that the child won't get that. That I think is important to mention. But it's also equally important to make sure that the child and or the parents, if they are seeing a problem, outreach to the teacher. If that isn't working, then outreach to the principal to make sure that we get the support in place the child needs. Okay, shifting gears. There was a question around, are schools going to be contacting families to confirm their hybrid remote choice? No, there won't be, we're not going to be doing that again. What I would say to families is if there is any change, we need to be made aware of that right away, because all of our plans are moving forward with the information that families put on the survey. I will say that we heard from many families after the fact that shifted their thinking, which was fine. We made all of those changes. But remember, we have to plan. So we have to have that information for our classes, for bus routes, and all of the scheduling that we need. So I would let families know, please, 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 if you have not, if you have for some reason shifted your thinking or you want to do something different than what you put on your survey, you need to outreach to principals directly now, because right now they're planning on what's on that survey. And I know, Matt, specifically, I mean, you've been working tirelessly with the bus company and all these bus routes. So, you change one student, it's going to shift a route. So we have to know, that's really important.
Just as a little bit of a safety blanket for families, obviously we want you to make sure that we're aware of these decisions as soon as possible, but there will be information on students within the cohorts released prior to the first day of school. So that would be one way just to double check. So obviously, when we release the cohorts and the students that will be in each of the cohorts, whether they're in the purple team or the gold team, and if you don't see your student's name in either of those and you were expecting them to be attending in the hybrid model, please reach out to us as soon as possible. And we can try to make some last minute modifications, but as Dr. DeFalco mentioned, the sooner that you can check over this information and the sooner we have all of these kids scheduled, the better it will be and the safer it will be for everyone.
And let me say it this way too, and I know that this might not be well received, and I apologize in advance for this, but I would ask families not to change their plans right now, because we're going on that information that we have. If you have to, when there's an urgent situation or something you're not comfortable with, we certainly understand those unique issues, but a parent had mentioned in the chat that many families changed their mind from June as they needed much more information as what the cases in Massachusetts would look like and seeing a detailed plan, et cetera, before making a final decision. I would agree with that parent, but we sent our final plans out and then sent out a survey. So my sense is that the majority of those families have made their decisions. But that being said, if there is a last minute change, we just need to know right away. But I would ask parents to please stand by the decisions they've made up to this point. The last part of that question was, what happens if numbers significantly change in the next week or two? Will there be enough time to pull everything together? We're asking parents to not have a significant change because that could potentially make some big impacts. I will say that we did hear from a few parents this week at the elementary level who said, we thought about it, we really want to go with a remote. We were able to accommodate some of those, but I will tell you, we're going to get to a point very, very soon. I mean, like really soon, we can't make any accommodations. So, we are at the place where we are, myself and the principals are literally like hand counting children and putting them in groups. It's, we got to stick with the decisions we made to the best we can. Let me shift to some additional questions we've answered. These were special education ones. A parent outreach said, I have not been contacted at all by anyone. Who would I contact in regards to kindergarten? I would ask that parent, if she is still listening, to please outreach Christina Schaefer. She's the principal at Millville Elementary School. You can grab her name and phone number right off of our website. Or you can email me directly and I can help put you in contact with Ms. Schaefer. But we want to make sure that you get the information that you need. We have a question on what's the class size for each grade level? So that's a good one. And it depends. So let's go first to grades 4 through 12. It's just easier to answer, to be frank. The average class size for grades 4 through 12 is 13. And so that's in-person instruction, 13 kids in front of a teacher, 13 students in a classroom. And by the way, that actually is ensuring that student desks are more than 6 feet apart. At the 6 feet apart separation, we can actually do about 16 kids in each classroom. So the good news is we're hovering right around 13, which is very reasonable. And in some cases, specifically for our grades kindergarten through 3rd, those numbers are actually smaller because of, remember, we have those partner teachers available. So in some cases, it's 10 students in a room. So the class sizes have never been this small or reasonable from that perspective. I'm going to shift to some of the questions. We have about 4 minutes that were emailed in, because I know some parents took a ton of time and pre-wrote their questions. I want to get to one about masks. The issue of masks has come up a lot. And so we can all kind of, I think, address this probably collectively. But the question is this. What are the disciplinary actions for mask non-compliance? Should I be worried that my child will find the mask policy too oppressive? And conversely, should I be worried that it will be too lax? How will BMRSD provide a safe and secure yet nurturing learning environment for my child in light of social distancing and mask requirements? That's like a huge mouthful, but let me start by answering it as a dad. I think that's probably the best way to answer this one, because I have a freshman and a sixth grader, and I was sharing at our new staff orientation today. About 2 weeks ago, I started taking my own children, out into the public, which is scary on a good day for those two. But speaking as a parent, but with this, I wanted to get them out in their masks. I wanted to start training them to not touch and pull and put their hands on their face, and right. So a lot of our kids have been home for months and months on end. So what I would say to parents is get ahead of it. Right? So get them practicing wearing the masks now. Many of you probably have. I know it's silly, but we wear them around our house sometimes just for a few minutes at a clip to just kind of get used to them, putting them on, taking them off and putting them on, and how to do that correctly. We had ESY, our extended year program at Millville Elementary, for a couple of weeks. These are students with significant needs, and 3-4-year-old students. Some were a little bit older than that. But they did great, Joe. I mean, I'll let you speak to that with the masks, but it was just about expectations and really being patient with them and giving them mask breaks and taking a kind of non-negotiable, we have to wear them approach, but also, processing with the students why. You want to talk a little bit about that, Jill?
So we did. We had a group of some of our more significant younger children who attended some of our ESY as well as some of our older students. And I was actually quite surprised when I saw some of our youngest learners getting off the bus with their little masks on. We gave them several breaks when we were outside. We social distanced, so they were able to take those masks off. We had some students, it was probably their first time ever experiencing masks, but we have students that, we need to work with them. We have our staff in school that we're gonna be almost starting off a little bit. We have some face shields. Not that that's the primary, PPE we want to go with, but we have some kiddos who may not be able to wear a mask for other issues. But we're doing practicing with them. But like I said, I was very proud to see, I didn't know what I was going to expect on the first few days of ESY, but we had some of our littlest, smallest learners with some of our most complex challenges came in with their little masks on. So we're very proud of them. They did a nice job. That's not to say that they wore them for all the hours they were there. They had breaks. They had some outdoor act time. But again, we had our youngest learners learning how to do this in school. And by the end of ESY, we did see gains, not only from our staff, from our students, but from our staff getting used to our new way of doing things. So we did see that, which was very nice to see.
I'd also like to piggyback off of what Dr. DeFalco said. Parents need to be a role model in wearing the mask too, so that it's not, just the child being told to wear a mask, that they see that the parent is wearing it and can understand why we all need to do this.
Absolutely. And so it's 6 o'clock. We have a hard stop because we have to start a school committee meeting. What we're going to do, though, is we will leave next week's Facebook Live open. I'm going to save this message thread, and I have all of the questions still that parents emailed in, and we'd ask you to keep them coming. As many questions as you have, keep throwing them at us. And what we'll do next Thursday is we'll finish answering the questions that were put in the thread. We'll finish answering the questions that were emailed to us and any other questions that you might between now and then. I will also say that, as Jill mentioned earlier, our staff, all of them are 100% returning on Monday, the 31st. We had our school leadership retreat this week. We had our new staff orientation this week, and it was all in person, and it was safe, socially distanced, masks, hand sanitizer, the whole thing. And so we're really excited to do our best to get back to it. But please join us next Thursday. Our staff will, I'm sure, principals will be sending out information that's school specific. I know they will, about scheduling and some other items this week. Stay tuned. Certainly much more to come, but we really appreciate everyone's engagement with this, and we'll speak again very, very soon. And again, with the questions, keep them coming. Thanks so much.